This is the future ELA classroom is here, using generative AI to improve writing practice, feedback, and revision. I'm joined today with Dr. Troy Hicks, who is the professor and chair of the English Language and Literature Department at Central Michigan University, and Andy Schoenborn, who is a high school teacher and the Michigan Reading Association president and award-winning author at Clare Public Middle Schools in Michigan. Andy and Troy have been hard at work using AI, talking about AI, learning about AI, and they're here today to share their knowledge and suggestions with you. And finally, about Writable. So my name is Tess. I head marketing up at Writable. Writable scaffolds student learning and builds lifelong writing and reading skills in grades 3 through 12. We save teachers time on daily instruction, feedback, writing practice. We're a research-backed solution. We have won many awards, including our third Cody Award this year. And we really are focused on growing great writers. And we know that revision and feedback drive them towards that growth. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today is how can we use research to grow student writers and AI tools that support the research. So, what is Writable? We have a responsive assignment library of over 1,000 assignments, including many AI assignment building tools. We work really hard to engage our writers and readers. We have many feedback tools for grading and faster feedback. We'll talk more about those today too, including automatic scoring and commenting. Recommended instruction, reporting, and really meeting your goals for whatever they are, whatever state you're in, whatever grade you're teaching. And some of our awards. We have been proven to have a 60% increase in assessment scores to grow great writers. And again, we're a common sense selection for learning, 3-time Cody Award winner, and that's it. So to introduce this is a future ELA classroom is here with Dr. Troy Hicks and Andy Schoenborn. Dr. Troy Hicks is a professor of English and Education at Central Michigan University, where he collaborates with K-12 educators to explore how they implement newer literacies in their classrooms and teaches master's and doctoral courses in education technology. He currently serves as chair of the Department of Teacher and Special Education. He is also director of the Chippewa River Writing Project, a site of the National Writing Project. He's a former middle school teacher. He has received numerous awards, including the Michigan Reading Association Teacher Educator Award and the Central Michigan University Excellence in Teaching Award. He is an ISTE certified educator, a trained facilitator in digital storytelling through Story Center, and an affiliate faculty member with Media Education Labs. Troy, you are very impressive. And as is Andy Schoenborn, who is a high school English teacher and award-winning author in Michigan at Clare Public Schools. He focuses his work on student-centered critical thinking, digital collaboration, and multimedia means. In 2013, he was honored with MCTE's Ray Lawson Excellence in Teaching Award for faithful service, inspirational qualities, and distinguished leadership. In 2014, he received the Great Lakes Bay Region Ruby Award, recognizing the upward, bright, and young. In 2017, he received the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribes ISE Award, Inspiration, Support, and Encouragement. And in 2019, he was honored with NCTE's Linda Rife Award for Outstanding Publication in a peer-reviewed journal. As a past president of the Michigan Council of Teachers of English and National Writing Project teacher consultant for Central Michigan University's Chippewa River Writing Project, he frequently conducts workshops related to literacy and technology. So we have two very serious writing, reading, literacy, and technology experts with us today. So I'm going to now pass it over to them to get us started.
Thanks so much, Tess. We are really looking forward to working with all of you tonight, learning with you, just seeing the types of AI tools that are already appearing in the chat. I'm going to be really eager to go back and take a look at this transcript to see what everyone is doing. And our agenda tonight is here. This is hopefully what we'll accomplish together in the next about 50 minutes or so. but the conversation can continue after this. You can reach out to us on social media or through other means. So you can see the bullet points, why writing is so important and what the research says. We're using AI to support practice and instruction, using it to save time on grading and increase feedback, uh, impact, using AI to improve revision strategies, and then some final moments for questions and resources. Andy, did you have anything else you wanted to add here?
No, I think one thing that's going to be interesting with this particular presentation is we sort of have Writable with us, which we're happy to have them hosting this presentation for us. And Troy is kind of from like the research and research sides of things, which is really wonderful. And I've been using AI in my classroom, a high school experience too, with all the ins and outs of what that might look like between talking to our IT departments, talking to our superintendents, talking to other teachers, and how we might be able to use AI in promising ways, and really how we're already using AI without really recognizing that we are, and how we can implement that in our classrooms to help our writers achieve some writing that they've never really been able to do before. And AI can help us with that.
All right, fantastic. So on the next slide, I think we have a bit.ly short link and a QR code. I'm sure one of our colleagues is going to drop that link to a shared resource doc into the chat. So you have that, and we'll keep adding to it throughout the conversation this evening. If you have other resources, just drop them in the chat, and Tess and Heidi and others with the Writable team are going to do their best to keep up, and we'll review afterwards too and try to keep that a living document for you to look at later. So, I think we're going to spend just a few moments talking about some of the stats, facts, and research on writing. We don't want to belabor those points because you're here tonight because you want to learn about AI and how these tools can support writers, and you're probably pretty well aware of some of these facts. We were looking to update that first one about the 27% rate of proficiency at the third and eighth grade level. That was from one of the earlier NAEP reports tests. I can't quite remember 2011, 2014. They haven't released a new one recently.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, if our state data is anything like the national data, I'm guessing that those numbers are probably pretty similar. So we know there is a challenge, and not that standardized testing is the be all end all to gauging writing proficiency, but it is one measure. And we also know from various reports from the Department of Labor and other organizations that writing is an essential skill in today's workplace. Whether you're college ready, career ready, you will be writing. And so we know that that is absolutely essential for student success. And we also know that as our population continues to diversify and we celebrate the many languages that our students are bringing to the classroom, they are still struggling to be proficient in English, which is the common language that we're using for academic proficiency. And so we want to do the best that we can to support them. And so those are just a few key stats. Again, we're not going to belabor these points. What we would like to talk about briefly is some of the undergirding research that guides us as writing teachers and also guides Writable as a platform that's developed, but can also guide you as you think about any of these tools that we're using tonight. And it's this ongoing cycle of instruction, practice, feedback, revision, and all of that leading to growth. So we'll dive into those really quickly and talk just a little bit more. So there are some things that we've been thinking about how we might be able to use AI both within Writable, but then also with other AI tools we'll share later to augment the instruction part of this. And that is that we as educators can use AI to build assignments, to create lessons, to enhance our own research and teach students how to do research in more productive ways. And then also, we see it's coming. If it's not already in your word processor, it is available in many of these online tools. The writing AI features are being built in, and I would not be surprised if you're possibly already using some of them yourself. And I know there's Copilot in the Microsoft products, and I can't imagine that Google's too much farther behind. So we want to build those into our instructional routines. We then want to provide students with opportunities to practice, and we want to be able to give them feedback in a timely and efficient manner. So we have comment creation tools so that we can use those tools to guide our own commenting and then get general feedback, but then dive in more specifically. We have scoring tools, we have conferencing tools and other communication tools. And then as we get to that revision stage and leading them towards growth, we have tools that can check for authenticity, source citation and research tools, other writing assistance tools, and things that will help with grammar, spelling, and syntax. And all of these are they're just so interesting to think about from the instructional side, and also what we can ask our students to do with them as well. And we're looking forward to diving into more this evening.
And I do just want to add, this research graphic is based on a research paper that Troy wrote, that is linked in the resource document that draws together research from many, many different researchers and Troy's own research. And it is what Writable is based on. But if you do want to read and dig more into the research behind each of these aspects, that is linked in there.
Yes, thanks, Tess. So, a few other things that have guided us, both Andy and I are longtime members of the National Council of Teachers of English, and two statements in particular are pertinent to our conversation tonight. This comes from their statement on literacy in a digital age that was released in 2019, right before everything became even more digital. And it suggests that the world demands that a literate person possess and intentionally apply a wide range of skills, competencies, and dispositions. These literacies are interconnected, dynamic, and malleable. And though we're not going to talk specifically about AI literacy tonight, it is yet another literacy skill, helping students understand when and how and why to use AI in different ways, and of course, hoping that they're doing it in a productive and ethical manner. The other piece comes from Nadia Bezeda, who released an essay as part of a collection of essays in the latest issue of English Education. And this is just a good caveat, critical perspective to say that when teachers foster classroom environments where students are engaging in authentic writing assignments, students are less likely to turn to AI apps to write their entire compositions for them. Instead, AI apps can provide assistance during the writing process for both teachers and students. And I know Andy's going to share some more insights on that from his perspective and what he's doing with his high school students as we go on throughout the webinar tonight.
Yeah, and this is just a graphic showing, I believe this was from a research study from EdWeek showing how teachers are generally spending their time during the week, grading, engaging with students, prepping. And I think what we are here to talk about is actually increasing your impact with AI, reaching more students in a more timely manner, um, helping students grow as writers in a faster, more personalized way, moving your time to focus more on the student and less on some tasks that might have taken you more time in the past, and really just enhancing your instructional experience and making it easier. I think generative AI is not like other tech tools that necessarily took a lot of learning and onboarding. They are really built to be easy and save you time. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, in general, Writable helps you increase the impact of your teaching with AI that engages students and motivates better writing in the moment. And so, we're going to talk about the AI that we built too, that is uh, has a teacher intermediated approach, is teacher guided, and is really focusing on teacher tools that allow you to save time, um, reach more students in the moment with feedback, generate feedback faster than you could necessarily write yourself, and really support students in a personalized way. So, Troy, before we dig into that, what are some concerns and caveats that have come up about AI?
Absolutely.
Because, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want everyone who's listening tonight and participating in the chat and who may view this in the future to understand that we are not just techno utopians. We do not believe that AI is going to solve all the world's problems. And in fact, it is probably going to create some problems for us on top of what has already been created. So these are just a summary of concerns and caveats that I've heard from teachers over the past 10, 12 months, things about cheating and how to make sure that students are using the tools in an ethical way. And not only just to catch a plagiarist, but to say, are they really doing the critical creative work that we want them to do as writers? Because that's going to help them grow. Both academically as students, but also as human beings in the world. There are limitations to some of the tools. We don't need to go into extensive detail, except to say that, yeah, some of the information that AI generates is either factually incorrect or outright, misleading. I mean, there's just a whole number of problems with it. How do we address that fact as we're teaching them to use these tools? And then the AI is only going to put out as an output what has been put into it from the natural language processing models and the huge databases. And unfortunately, some of the things that are available online are not all that great. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But also in terms of how you prompt the AI and what you ask the AI to do, that's going to matter as well. So this word priming has become part of it, becoming a prompt architect. And we want to teach our students how to be prompt architects so the AI is being used in, again, thoughtful and productive ways. On that next slide, then, we're going to get to some concerns and caveats that have been raised more broadly by Kate Crawford, who wrote Atlas of AI, Power, Politics, and the Planetary Costs of Artificial Intelligence. Highly engaging read about her trip, quite literally around the world to different locations where they were mining rare earth metals, server farms, content moderation, where the employees are doing that, trying to understand how AI is being developed and how it's being used. Again, you can look at these quotes and see some of the concerns that she raises in the book. So all of that to say that we have a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to the use of AI as well. And so we just want to make that well known to those who are listening, and also provide you with some other talking points that you can bring up in your professional learning communities. So you are approaching this in a techno-skeptical way.
And I'd just like to add really quick before we get to the poll too that one of the things that helps us with growth, and I was talking to a student about this today, not just with AI but with any form of learning, is being willing to take even small risks along the way. So taking small risks, whether it's using AI and teaching students and teaching ourselves how to be digitally sort of competent and be good citizens as well, and trying to understand all of the different things AI have, because whether students are using AI for their own writing, they are certainly encountering AI, whether it's through YouTube videos or it's through what shows up in their feeds or it's advertisements. So being able to be critical thinkers about what it means looking at AI constructed materials that they are already experiencing is important for us to consider as well. So yes, we're going to be using AI tools to help us and students write, but also trying to understand all the other little nuanced caveats along the way, which is really what we do as writers and teachers of students with a process of writing anyway. It's coming at it from multiple perspectives, not just the writer, but also audience, purpose, and understanding of how all of those come fit together.
Absolutely. So I did start the poll. I am just getting a temperature check on if you're planning to use AI tools in your classroom. It's really interesting that about 75% of folks are saying that they are planning to use AI, and about 25% are not planning to use AI. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to see. We also have a big poll that we have had access to. Um, that will be interesting to look at. So I'm going to close this poll at 76% final that we're planning to use AI. And if we look at the next slide, you can see that around 74% of teachers are planning to increase their usage this year. Around 10% of teachers used generative AI last year. And about 38% plan to use AI in their classrooms for the first time ever this year. So I think this is some really interesting stats. These come from HMH's 2023 educator report. I think they surveyed about 1,500 educators. And so it'll be interesting to see this, I think, year over year too, right? This is the first year that there are quite a handful of tool options for you to experiment and try. And so I think let's move on to the kind of tools and support you might have for practice and instruction.
So we kind of talked about this just a little bit, how AI tools support the research and instruction in practice. And this is that first beginning portion of focusing in on practice itself, whether it's assignment building tools, lesson creation tools, research tools, and tools with word editors. And this is really Troy's wheelhouse in here too. So we'll hear quite a bit of what he learned and some other tools, including Writable and beyond.
Yeah. Troy, did you have anything you wanted to say before we kind of actually look at some tools
I'm
on?
gonna I think go ahead and show
Okay.
what's in Writable, and I'm gonna gather a few things that we can drop into the chat to augment this, because of course, and Writable is a wonderful product, but we also know that not everybody has access to it. So we are going to try to provide other opportunities with some different AI tools that are a free or freemium resource as well. So we'll talk about that as we go.
Yeah, and Writable is free for everyone to try. There are links to sign up for a free account today if you do want to try any of these AI assignment building tools or scoring and commenting. So, one of the screenshots you're looking at here, you'll see this actually says Heroism, a Philosophical Perspective. And this was a real assignment that Andy has been doing in his classroom this year. And so, what I did is I said, this is a narrative assignment. I want 3 multiple choice questions. I want 1 short response and 1 extended response. And what I got was an entire assignment outline with a title, a prompt, multiple choice questions, and answer keys. Um, I got again responses to the short response questions, prompts, and answer keys. But it's also important to know that these are all editable and these are not going to be perfect. But these are inspiration. These are to spark creativity. Andy, what did you think when you saw, AI create an assignment that you had already created?
I think it was really interesting because one of the first things I noticed when like back in December when Chat GPT kind of became a thing is that
Mhm.
teachers were like, oh, we got plagiarism issues, but then teachers were also saying, oh, but I could do this to help me with my lesson plans, which you could because I suppose it kind of scrapes. But what Writable does differently, and what I was impressed by that was it does do similar types of scraping as Chat GPT does, but it does it in a way that's going to be more useful for classroom use and my use, and it makes it more editable. So I have options as a teacher um, from the assisted assignment results instead of just reading like a print off of bullet points essentially that kind of help me figure out what I might want to do when it comes to planning lessons.
Yeah, and
Oh,
so again, I put in that was a full, multi-section assignment, but you could also just get a prompt idea, right? So you could type in heroism, or you could type in, the chapter of the book that you're currently working on in class, or, a topic that you're planning on next week. And again, these are not prompts you necessarily have to use, but you can use them for inspiration, you can edit them, and then go on to quickly build an assignment based around, a prompt. So I think AI, as many teachers have, I think, also used in straight in ChatGPT, have been using AI for inspiration and for lesson planning, right?
and these
Um,
prompt suggestions that you're seeing here in the previous slide and this slide as well. I teach inquiry work quite a bit. So we ask big questions. We have students come up with their own questions. Sometimes that can be just as intimidating to students as having a blank page and now you're asked to write. So I don't even know what questions to ask. Students will ask sometimes. So what we can do as a group is we can come up with a few questions that we might like, whether it's me helping or just listening to students add them. Then we can put them into Writable, and then we have a series of questions. And so now I can pick or choose, perhaps as a student, about what seems to be interesting or compelling to me that I might want to explore. And if it's not quite right, I can still edit it for myself too. So that can help. That can help jumpstart some of that thought process. And when I was teaching AP students, those students would have difficulty with that sometimes too. But teaching my alternative education students, they're really not quite as experienced with coming up with questions that kind of get beyond a very quick one word response. So having these deeper questions that AI is allowing us to have through Writable has been helping students quite a bit.
awesome. Yeah, and then, I'm not going to play this right now, but there is a how-to video in the resources if you do want to see exactly how it works. And from there, we'll also move on to AI to save time on grading and increase feedback impact, which I think is one of the most promising areas for teacher tools, teacher-facing tools, when it comes to saving time here. So I do have another poll on for those folks who have tried AI so far this year. Has it saved you time? I'm curious to hear. Has generative AI saved you time, Andy or Troy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes, it has.
How has it saved you time?
Well,
What have you been
even
doing?
even in simple ways, so like if I'm writing an email, for example, I'll see there's a predictive software that kind of gives. So sometimes I use that. Sometimes I use that with my text. Those are pretty simple ways in which AI is kind of helping. Troy, you might have some other ways beyond just that AI is helping you.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be talking with some pre-service teachers later this week about the idea of using AI for lesson planning and where it helps, but also where it falls short. So, for instance, it might generate a lesson plan that then says, "Oh, go find credible web sources to explore this idea further." Well, you still have to have the content knowledge and the technical knowledge to know what those credible web sources are, but maybe it did give you a couple interesting questions to ask your students or kind of an interesting way to sequence your lesson. I've also used it when I was trying to write objectives for a workshop. I was just stuck, and I'm like, I've written so many objectives for workshops in the past, but here's my workshop description. Here's my audience. Help me come up with some learning objectives. And I have to admit, they sounded a lot like what I would do. I was able to take those and tweak them a little bit. And so um, I consider those to be on the side of more ethical uses. If I was to just copy and paste it and use it, that raises other questions. And then I talk about how I've used these things when I meet with those people. So at any rate, yes, I've been using it in different ways, and I'll be curious to hear there's questions in the chat that are emerging about it as well. So yeah, we can keep talking.
Yeah, I about 78% of people said that it saved them time. I did notice in the chat one person mentioned using it to rewrite parent letters, which I think is a really clever, interesting use of it. I know I think all of us have used AI to give us editing suggestions as well too, as we're writing emails or communication in general. So I'll pass this to you, Troy. Some interesting research on feedback.
Certainly, of course, probably anybody who has any familiarity with educational literature in the last 20 plus years knows about John Hattie and the meta-analyses and things like that. And of course, here we just are reiterating the fact that effective feedback enhances writing skills and helps students take ownership of their learning, helping them to identify areas for improvement. It reveals confusing or unclear sections of writing to the writer. It encourages perseverance and boosts confidence in writing. And I think some of this is coming out in the chat, and I know Andy's going to talk a little bit about it too. When we use the AI to start generating feedback, it is probably going to hit some of those top level things, but then we can really use our time and expertise as teachers to give very specific feedback to our students as well. And then, of course, yes, I always like this framing of what feedback is: goal of reference, tangible, transparent, actionable, user-friendly, timely, ongoing, consistent. I sometimes condense that and share this with my undergraduate students as well as my master's and doctoral students or colleagues in the writing project. Timely, specific, goal-oriented. Those are the three things that I think about with feedback: timely, specific, and goal-oriented. And so I think that's a nice summary there. So again, we're going to look at this comment and content creation here and the scoring creation. And people are talking about rubrics in the chat. AI can help you create rubrics and think about the scoring criteria for rubrics. And then I know we'll talk a little bit more about the conferencing and communication as well.
So timely is an interesting one for you to bring up because I think it's the biggest one that AI can help tackle and has been one of the hardest ones to achieve as a teacher, right? So if you have 40 students writing, how do you give them feedback as they're writing and give everybody impactful feedback who needs it before they are finished with their work? you're one person, right? You're one teacher. So we did make a number of features to try and make things more timely with AI suggested comments and AI suggested comments, scoring, and authenticity checking. So I did actually just want to show live AI suggested comments. So I took one of Andy's real pieces of student writing and I dropped it in Writable. So what I did is I put in Andy's student writing so we can see right here and we can look at the assignment. I'll give it a second to load. You can see here is this piece of student writing that we wrote. And right next to it is the rubric. And AI automatically gave us suggestions on the scores for each rubric item. I can remove it or add it. It also gave a rubric level comment. And I'm curious, Andy, what did you think when you saw the scores in the comments?
Well, first of all, it scored a little more difficult than I would normally score this, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's not a good or bad thing. I do think that part of the reason for that is the assignment that I was given was a philosophical reflection, which afforded students a little more leeway and not such a strict rubric to kind of look at. There was some research based in it, looking at a number of different media and multimedia perspectives. Um, but so using this particular point, we use a narrative rubric for it. So still, I think it scored fairly well. The other thing beyond the score that I really like to focus in on is because if we're going to be talking about revision, I think it's important to consider how students are receiving
Mhm.
suggestions for revision. And usually, like for me and my students, it's not points and scores that help me to revise. It's trying to it's reading the comments that come that way. And I think the comments that Writable suggests for students are actionable. They're applicable. They come right away. But a lot of times with students, even with the feedback that I have, it's not just enough to have feedback for students there and call it good. We still have to come back to it together and asking students to analyze, to talk about what was the feedback that Writable gave you? What did you like about it as a writer? What are some of the things you might want to push back as a writer? Because that's important too. The idea here is not just to create writers that are learning from AI means, but to create writers who are making purposeful and intentional decisions about what they're doing and learning how to use feedback. Because feedback
Mhm.
isn't just about getting the A. Feedback is sometimes about doing some of that pushing back as well, so that you can learn and how to better articulate how you want to address what it is you're creating. In this case, with a philosophical reflection.
Yeah, and so on this guide grade screen, there's only one piece of student rating here because we only put in one piece. But if you had 40 students, all of your live writing would show up on this screen, and you would see a on this screen a paper level piece of feedback. So as students were writing, you could generate feedback. Andy, I know you mentioned to me that it was like 90% there, and you would just want to make it a little bit more personal, but you could actually send feedback directly to students as they were writing in what would be a much faster way, right, than reading every paper and writing every piece of feedback. And by the time you got to the end, students might have moved on, right, from where they were at.
hmm It opens up new opportunities to talk about the feedback that students are receiving. So I might not just say, there's your feedback, and I'll just add your name to it, but I might ask them to say, hey, what feedback did you get? And let's talk about that feedback that you received,
Mhm.
because that's a portion of revision that doesn't happen, that happens very rarely, because it takes so much time for teachers to read and give feedback, written feedback as well.
Right, and so, like, you could even send this comment and then send an additional message that said, "Do you what did you think of this feedback? Was this helpful?" And then there's also a draft score, so you can see that, the teacher hasn't scored this yet, but they are given a scoring suggestion, that's in draft, if they want to use that to help them. I know some teachers Andy and Troy, you've had a lot of experience as a teacher, a lot of teacher education, and a lot of ELA specific education, but not every teacher has been taught how to teach writing, right? So these can also help guide a teacher and give them some professional learning opportunities as they are grading and guiding, and some spark creativity. on what you might say to your students. So I'm going to go back.
While you're transitioning their tests, one thing I would add too is that as I'm giving feedback to students, I often create template language for myself. Hey, thank you for completing X assignment. Here were the 3 criteria we were really focused on for this first one. And then I kind of fill in the blank for each student. So in some ways, what we're seeing here with the AI generated feedback from Writable is this opportunity to then really, okay, it's already put in the skeleton for me. Now I can go in and put the meat on the bones of that feedback and be more specific.
Yeah, and I think what we're also just trying to generally do with these tools is help you reach students in the moment, conference in the moment, chat in the moment, have those really important connections and conversations with your students, because there's no replacing the teacher. Any sort of narrative about how AI would replace the teacher is laughable. Um, your job is incredibly important and irreplaceable, but it can support you, right? And actually reaching more students and connecting more, I think. So again, if you did want to watch a video on how this works, we do have that. This again is just a slide showing those draft scores. And then we do have also something called authorship alerts. So I don't know if we have any teachers who have been worrying about plagiarism or who have experienced it. We have Turnitin's authenticity checker inside of Writable, which is really helpful. It checks for both originality and also checks for AI generated writing. But what it isn't doing is checking for copying and pasting or how many revisions have happened and general insights, especially in comparison to the rest of a class. So this is an original tool in Writable that really gives you insights into how a student's behavior in terms of writing. So you can judge for yourself what you think might be different or need attention, right? But without saying, necessarily this is AI writing or your student has plagiarized something. So again, you do get an originality score and a AI score in Writable. So this is also really exciting. So Writable's tools right now are really teacher facing, but there are a lot of student facing AI tools there as well. So I'm going to pass this off to Troy and Andy to talk about AI to improve revision strategies.
Yeah, so we're going to be focusing on some additional tools outside of Writable here in just a moment. And the idea being that our students are going to be using these. When I was first introduced to one of these tools you're about to see in a moment here called Writer, it's probably about 2 years ago. And one of my colleagues who's a professional in business and industry is a copy editor. Basically, she creates blog posts, social media posts, email newsletters, things like that. And she's like, I got to show you this tool. I am using it every day. And I think that that's becoming more and more common. One of the things that I think is important, though, again, and I'm seeing these questions come up in the chat and some questions here for us as presenters, is this going to replace the teacher? Is this going to be something that takes away the humanity of the writing? I don't think so. I think there's opportunities, as there have always been, even with automated essay scoring, even with spell checking, even with grammar checking. That's where we're able to use our experience to draw out what our writers know and help them become better at it and better able to do these things. So for all of these strategies and tools we're talking about, I feel the teacher is absolutely essential. And I hope Andy can talk a little bit more about that as we move into this discussion, some of the tools and what his students do. So on the next slide, we have just a very top level overview of some of our tried and true revision strategies, things that we like to do with our writers, including sentence combining. So you can take a set of sentences that have already been created, either from a published work or just some generic ones that you've found. The Kilogons have a number of books out there on sentence combining. You can find samples and break sentences up and move them around, moving subjects into objects and changing active to passive, trying to put things in lists and with dashes and emphasis and things like that. You don't even have to talk about the grammar, but you can talk about sentence combining and uncombining effectively to help students think about revision. We can look at mentor texts, and I know Andy's going to talk a lot more about that, so I'm going to skip on to the third one with assignment planning. How can we invite students to use graphic organizers, quick writes, working through multiple sections of a paper and iterating over time. And then also, when we think about the classic challenge that I think we all face, it is add more details. So are there AI tools that can at least help us get students moving in the right direction, even if what the AI tools produce may still seem a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Cheeky, little off the mark. We can at least begin to look at it and then critique and criticize it. Andy, did you want to say anything about mentor text really quick before we talk about generative, pre-trained, and transformative AI tools?
But just that mentor text can come from lots of different places. So whether they're published works or sometimes they're student mentor texts, we can also use these AI tools to help students create personalized mentor texts as well. I have a slide that's coming up that to show how and why we might want to do that with students. So I think I'll wait until we get to that slide.
All right. So what I wanted to just point out here, this is the core of what made us all so worried about ChatGPT, is the fact that it is creating something new every time. And I'm not a computer scientist, nor a statistician, nor a linguist that studies these things at this level of detail. So I'm giving the very basic overview here, borrowed from Wikipedia, and that is that these models, they generate, so it's new. It's something that comes up new every time, which is why we're still struggling somewhat with authenticity checking, though some of those tools are getting a little more efficient. It's pre-trained, so it's grabbing from a corpus of data that's already out there. And so, as I alluded earlier, the language that exists on the internet, some of it's good, but some of it has some problems. And so the transformer is only going to predict the next most likely word or letter, or trying to put things in order based on what you've given it to prompt, based on what it's seen that's already out there in the training model. And then the transformer, of course, is that it's taking things and putting them together in different orders than what has been seen before. And so that's why it's both difficult to detect, but it also provides us with opportunities to show students how language works, and to talk about the ways that the AI is building the language, and then what it is that they can still bring as humans and as creatives to that process. So, Tess, did you want to share a little bit about this particular example of your ChatGPT prompt?
I did. I see it. I'm even made a note to myself at the top of this slide. So ChatGPT is, one of the apps that we suggest trying. Trying with students, trying on your own. It is what most of the AI tools that you'll see are built on. And I think it's important to understand what built on means. So you can call ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT questions, but an AI tool has had specialized engineers creating boundaries and things that it won't come back and say, and specialized proficiency levels and standards on it. So, ChatGPT is really useful and interesting and exciting to use, but it's not necessarily going to provide you the same results that some of the tools that we're going to show you provide, or what Writable has been providing. But I did put a screenshot in here about, again, I said, what is heroism? Write a paragraph definition defining heroism at a proficient ninth grade level. And again, that could give you a mentor text, right? That can give you an idea of what it would look like. And Andy, I know you mentioned changing the audience, right? At times. So you could say, write this as if I was speaking to the president, or if I was speaking to preschoolers, or anything that you can come up with, right? And you can see how it changes tone, how it changes word choice, lots of inspiration. And then Troy, I know you've got some favorites to share.
Yeah, so again, even looking back at that ChatGPT example, there are places where we could go back in and say, well, here's what it generated, but this is kind of bland. Are there places where we could add, where we could take some things away, reorganize. So lots of ways to even use what ChatGPT generates as a mentor text or a text for critique and analysis and revision. This particular tool is called pseudo-write, and the idea behind this particular tool really relies on the use of sensory language. So you can see in this particular screenshot where I was able to highlight a particular word or phrase, and I clicked that describe more. And then over in the right-hand side, you could see that it gave descriptions that speak to the five senses. So sight, sound, touch, et cetera, et cetera. And it will also produce some metaphors. Again, some of them are, kind of cheeky. They're not the best, but that also gives you opportunity to begin this conversation about what good high quality writing looks like. How obvious do you want these to be? Do you want them to be more subtle? Can we take what pseudo-write created and maybe alter it? Things like that. So pseudo-write, really helpful to think about sensory language, the good and the bad, and then to go in and use that tool. The next tool is the one that I mentioned a few moments ago, that is a writer. And this is the one my colleague introduced me to probably almost about 2 years ago now, where she's a copy editor. She's constantly looking for things to produce email newsletters, social media posts, things like that. And what Writer, like many of these other copy editing tools do, is allows you to choose a tone. So up in that top blue oval, you could click that menu down and you could choose between being argumentative or compassionate or informative. And there are probably 24 or more different tones that you can adopt. You type in your keywords, you type your use case. I want a blog post, I want an email, I want an outline. And then you can also choose the level of creativity that you want the AI to go with. So how far into its corpus database is it going to go to find what it thinks the next predictive word will be? Do you want it to stay pretty narrow and on topic, or do you want to give it more creativity and flexibility? So copy.ai, Jasper, there's a whole number of other tools like Writer that are out there that you could play with. This tool, Perplexity, is one that is truly fascinating to me because it was the first one that I saw even before Bing's search that was integrating source material. So you would type in an example, like in this case, I was trying this idea, what is an example of courage? And you can ask it to search the whole web, or you can ask it to search Wikipedia, or you can ask it to search academic articles, and it will continue to add citations along the way. I know that Bing has started to do that now, so students can open up those additional sources and do lateral reading, confirming and making sure that the information is consistent across sources. And I'm sure that Google is probably going to have something similar to this too. But Perplexity also allows them to then ask further questions and helps prompt them to ask further questions, which helps lead them deeper into their inquiry process. So those are just a few that I've tried. I have not tried this final one quite so much, but I've heard good things about it, and that is WordTune, where again, much like pseudo-write, you can highlight something and then you can ask it to expand or contract or add more detail or say it in a different way. And I think this really brings up some interesting opportunities for comparison. So again, students really struggling with a sentence. I don't quite know how to go and restate this. My teacher says I need to say this in a different way. Well, WordTune's going to give you 3 or 4 options for restating it, maybe even more if you're in the paid version. What's the advantage to option A versus option B? What's the advantage to option B versus option C? Can you take something and create something different? So the AI can generate these different options for students to then go back and assess. And rather than merely copying and pasting, it can open up a conversation about different types of revisions and their effectiveness.
Yeah, I know. I actually have tried WordTune on my own writing and found it a really interesting Chrome extension as well too. So it's pretty cool. So Andy, I know you've been heavily using generative AI with your students. How have you approached it this year?
Well, working with students, especially in high school, and I'm in an alternative education setting right now, although I've worked with students of all different varieties and skill levels, we just kind of think about it as play first. We play with writing a lot anyway, so it's not always about trying to get it right the first time, but it's playing with different kinds of tools. And so I had a few students who didn't want to do any writing at all. So when ChatGPT first kind of became hot last December, then of course all the criticisms that came with it. I had students that decided, hey, let's try to make some poetry, and they made a book of poetry using it. It's really kind of interesting because not only did they create a book of poetry using AI generated words, but they also took 5 lines from each of those poems and then used a Night Cafe, which is a text to image creator, AI generative creator, and so really they used a bunch of prompts to kind of help create an entire book of poetry in about 30 minutes. And then we had students read it. And what they found was it was awful. The poetry had no feeling, it had no heart, it had no real emotion. It talked about things that would seem inspiring perhaps, but as one student put it, it just didn't have that necessary spark that he was thinking it was going to have. So our students aren't just looking for ways to try to cheat the system or rig the system, but students have been looking for those types of possibilities probably since, chisel and stone, finding ways to kind of circumvent things, right? So by opening up those ideas and having us play, we get to look at perspectives and nuances, thinking about character development, talking about the philosophy of what it means to be a hero. I've had students use AI to say, um, write a one-page response, reflective response from the perspective of X, and then they choose a person, real or imagined, that gives a definition of what it means to be a hero. So I've had students use AI to talk about what Eminem might say, what Megan Trainor might say, what Donald Duck might say, what Bart Simpson might say. I even had one student put in from the perspective of Agent 47. So this is for our gamer folks out there. If you're familiar with the game Hitman, which is a pretty old game, Agent 47 is the video game character from there. And what was interesting is we weren't so much looking for the answers so much, but as a way to generate conversation about writing too. So student found that even Agent 47, the AI was able to pretty interestingly connect how that video game character was viewing heroism. So what we really did that for was to think about the variety of different perspectives that come when it comes to creating that definition for yourself or what it means to be a hero. And that opened up fantastic conversations, and really sometimes confirmed students' ideas and actually gave students the permissions really to kind of push back on that. So that was interesting. We can learning how to revise as we write. And one student said, I asked him about the Bart Simpson one. I said, it's kind of weird because I don't know how well Bart Simpson would do with answering that question. And the student said, well, it wasn't really the answer that he found was interesting, but it was the way that it captured the tone of Bart Simpson. So it got kind of the voice right, but it didn't necessarily get what to the crux of what it means to be a hero. So even with students, and I'm working with alternative education students. So these are students who are not in the general setting. They come for a different experience. But even those students who some people would say that they don't really have a very sophisticated way of thinking about reading and writing, even they can recognize tone and then have conversations. Because if I were to say, today we're going to talk about tone in my classroom, crickets right off the bat. But if we were able to ask them to find a perspective from something that is interesting to them, then we can have that conversation about tone. We can have the conversation about perspectives and nuance and what it means to do our writing. And then it's easy to push back on these pieces of writing because no one's feelings are going to be hurt. It's hard to do that sometimes in peer review because you're worried about what someone is going to say.
Yeah. I know I do also have, Andy, some screenshots from the assignment that you did, and I linked these in the resource guide as well too. So if you want to go actually look at the book that Andy made, it is linked in there. I read it last night. I thought it was really fascinating and interesting. And you created images as well too, right, with AI?
Yeah, we used Night Cafe, and so we took the
Yeah.
first 5 lines of each poem. It was interesting because we had AI develop the themes for the book, and then
Mhm.
write to the themes in the book, and then another text to image AI generate the pictures. So the only thing that we did really was we used the tools to prompt different ways to get deeper and deeper into creating this.
What are you gonna do next with AI in your classroom?
Well, like I said, right now we're looking at different perspectives, and so
Mhm.
I'm using those one-page responses. I'm asking students to use they say, I say, but what are they saying in the perspective of whatever person or character they chose, and then I'm asking them to kind of do the I say. What do they say in response to that? So what are my students saying, and how they might eventually incorporate some of that. But a lot of what my students are going to be doing, and what we've heard Troy speak about and Tess speak about, myself speak about, is we're providing students with lots of choice when it comes to determining what they want to incorporate in their writing. We're not, I don't, I'm not using AI to say, okay, great, you want to do this paper? We can do it in 5 minutes. Off you go. Good job. Turn it in. You have got yourself an A. That's not really how we're using it. How I'm using it is more of a way to generate conversation and to think about those nuanced ways of what it means to write and be in a process of writing. Because in a process of writing, you have to kind of play a lot of different hats at one time. Sometimes you're the writer, and sometimes you're the reader, and sometimes you're the audience, and sometimes you're giving feedback. And so it gives us a chance to use AI to kind of do all of those in a safe playing field. So if we want to say that whatever the AI put together was awful, we can say it and we can be okay with it and kind of even laugh about it. And then we can talk about what we would do to improve it in our writing so that we can not have things be, as they said about AI, simply awful.
This is sparking a lot of some messages in chat, and because we are just now moving to the questions, while I run this last poll, I do want to pose a question to both of you that you brought up is what are your thoughts on students using AI to generate papers? Do you think that the fear around AI generated student work that teachers might miss is valid or real? How are you feeling about it in your real life class? And just like philosophically, how are you feeling about it? And I'm going to start this poll because I'm curious. Do you feel a little bit more comfortable about generative AI after chatting with us for the last hour? So Troy and Andy, how do we address the fear? Do we think the fear is valid?
I I do. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I'm obviously a techno advocate, but I'm also a bit skeptical, and I worry. Like even in the courses that I teach, as I'm trying to work, shoulder to shoulder with students and see their drafts in progress and give them comments and feedback using Word or Google Docs, or potentially Writable. Something's going to sneak by me and someone's going to feel cheated. And I was talking with another colleague about this, and it's why do we get so upset? It's because we feel that students are cheating themselves, and we want them to learn, and then we also feel that they're kind of betraying us. I took this time to design this lesson and give you feedback, and you're cheating on it, and that makes me feel bad. So there's a lot of human emotion involved in this. And so by no means am I suggesting that, yes, let's just all go use AI tomorrow and be happy about it. And, the techno overlords will take over and we'll have Skynet and everything else. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that the history of educational technology tools and the way that these tools get integrated, not only in education, but also in the world, suggests to me that AI ain't going anywhere, and we've got to think about some really thoughtful ways to use it. And so I'm hoping that some of the resources we've provided, some of the questions we've asked, and the angles we've explored tonight give our audience members here at EdWeb some possibilities. And even though there are some that are still quite worried about it and may not use AI, and we have to respect that. My hope is that the conversation was at least enlightening, and perhaps will give them some more to think about and talk about, and affirm their own stances about why they choose not to use AI. So
And Andy, you made a really interesting point to me when I said, "What did you think about AI?" And you said, "Well, A, you would recognize it if your students had a generated paper, and B, what does it mean about your prompt if the students could answer easily with AI?"
Right. And our students aren't, they're not as terribly naive as we think they are, and we're not as terribly naive as they think we are at times too, right? So sometimes what happens, especially when creating this, my students were like, "Oh, their first thought was, this means that we can cheat." And then, and about 2 minutes later, same students having conversation with each other said, "Yeah, well, you could, and you might be able to get away with that with some teachers. However, Andy reads our words. Andy knows our voice. And Andy is with us, and he's writing with us every single day. And he's sharing his words with us, and we're critiquing and giving feedback on his words, and he's doing the same back to us. So it's this cyclical process. So, and one student said, and by the way, he knows I can't write like that anyway. So
Mhm.
that was an interesting point, I think, because it's really a question that's kind of been a touch point for a long time. So the beginning of the 20th century, um, as we kind of moved into this, there was a big question about Google. Well, if we can just Google everything, then we're not going to need teachers. And so one of the ideas that came up during those conversations 20 years ago or so was that, well, if you're asking questions that are so easy to look up on Google for an answer, then maybe you should be asking yourself, what type of questions are you asking your students to consider? I really think, and I'm pausing because these are hard conversations. Because as Troy brought up, it brings a lot of emotion into what we are doing, and we're very passionate about what we're doing. But it almost becomes a pedagogy question, not an AI question, but a pedagogy question. And how are we approaching the learning that we're doing with our students? If our assignments and the way that we give feedback can so easily be just kind of, well, even before AI, copy and pasted off Wikipedia and thrown on a paper and turned in, and maybe students getting away with it, then I think maybe we have to think more critically about what we're doing as teachers as far as the types and qualities of assignments that we're giving, and how we are, if we are open with our students about AI, they know they're not really fooling us because they know that we're teaching them about it and how to learn about it, and its limitations. And those are deeper conversations that we can have, which actually I think help build community within a group of writers between teachers and students. It actually helps to build relationships because nobody is really trying to fool the other person. It's not a game of I'm going to catch you or I'm not going to get caught type of thing, which to be frank has been around since probably school and education and learning has happened, right? There's always sometimes this bit of cat and mouse that can happen. But I think that the more that we are willing to work with and try and see limitations with our students, the more our students are willing and able to then respond in ways that are going to be not only surprising to us as they improve and grow as writers, but also potentially surprising to them as well. Because sometimes, even looking at tone and the writing of tone, it is hard for me sometimes to write an email and think I'm coming across the right way. So even Grammarly has a tone feature, which I really appreciate. So it tells me, because I'm trying to be happy and I have a cheerful tone, and I want to make sure that my writing is doing those types of things. So I'm using that. I'm encouraging my students to use that because I want them to be thoughtful about how it is that they're communicating with people. Because in the end, that's really what we're doing as writers is we're communicating and we're finding a way to take what I want to say as the writer and approach it with my audience. And if I just simply use AI carte blanche, then I'm robbing both of us from that conversation. But if I can use AI in a way that's going to maybe help me say what I want to say in a more nuanced and important way that smooths out that conversation and smooths out that communication, I think the AI can be a huge plus in those areas, especially for students who find themselves maybe differently abled than other students and have a hard time recognizing social cues, reading cues themselves of how people are trying to express themselves.
That is so well said. And I also think that, different aspects of digital literacy become part of the curriculum, right? Like, again, like you said, when Google or Wikipedia were new inventions, and we as teachers needed to understand the tool and teach students how to use it responsibly and teach limitations. Um, and that opened up a world for students, right? Like, I know, Andy, you said you teach Wikipedia as a tool for inspiration. It's not something that students should avoid, right?
Right, exactly. I talk about it as like a surface level scraping. So
Mhm.
when we're trying to if I'm trying to ask students to get below the surface and get deeper in what they're trying to say, it can be a way for us to think about our entry points as writers or entry points into topics of what we might want to explore, and then we can dive deeper. So my students have been taught well too by other teachers, and Wikipedia is, they get, so we're not supposed to use Wikipedia. And I said, well, I suppose it depends on how you're using it. If you're using it to just copy and paste things, then probably not. But if you're using it as just kind of a quick general reference, we use Wikipedia all the time, right? I mean, maybe not that specific website, but if you're trying to have settle an argument about how many touchdowns did so and so score last weekend, you're going to quickly look it up, right? And it's going to help you figure that out. That's that surface level scraping that just begins to get us into the deeper conversations that students don't even necessarily realize they're interested in yet until they start looking at it that
Right. You only know what you know, right? There's so much that we as teachers also know that we keep learning. So I know we are a little bit over time here. I have been so impressed with the chat as well too, and everybody's amazing comments and feedback to each other. Um, and I just want to thank you both for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and experience, your thoughts and wisdom, and all of the amazing tool suggestions and classroom instructional ideas that you've done. I am going to run one more poll here, just to get a um, quick insight if there's anybody who would like us to reach out more, or if we can help you try and use Writable. You can't Writable accounts are always free for teachers, and students get 30 days to write in the app. Their trial starts once they start writing, but your the student writing is never lost from the free teacher account, and you can use the AI tools. So again, we are the first tool with AI suggested scoring and commenting on any assignment without any setup needed. It really is as easy as that. So I know lots of folks have said, I wish I had more hours training. I think all the tools that we're seeing and Writable included is trying to create something where you don't need a lot of training to use it, where you don't have to spend a lot of time with setup, and where these are just go and try. So I hope that everyone had a great evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. And we will reach out if you would like us to. So thank you so much, everyone.